Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at drop shipping in 2024. You guys sent in a really cool guide, and I gotta say, even I was learning a ton, just like skimming through it. So we're here to cut through the noise, figure out is drop shipping dead or alive, and give you guys the info you need to make some good decisions.
I think what really jumped out at me when I first looked at this guide was how much it talked about the mindset that you need to be successful with drop shipping. It's not just about finding that one product.
Hmm.
It's about outworking the 90% of people that actually quit within the first week.
Yeah, that 90% stat was wild. Like, that kind of reframes this whole drop shipping is dead thing, right? Like, maybe it's not that the model's broken, but that people come in with totally unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. And the guide actually highlights this by talking about the success of Zendrop Plus members.
Hmm.
They're like 50 times more likely to make sales.
Yeah.
And when you dig into why, it's because they're invested. They're learning. They're using better tools. They're getting support. It's all about commitment.
Okay, so I'm seeing the difference between like the get rich quick hype and what it actually takes to build something sustainable. But the guide also dives into some other big myths around drop shipping, like this whole saturation argument.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of times that saturation is really just a mirage. It's not that there's no space for new people. It's that the market is absolutely flooded with inactive stores,
Hmm.
people who gave up before they even really started, and that's where your opportunity is.
So the takeaway here is that drop shipping is less about finding a magic product and way more about persistence and strategy.
100%.
Mm.
And that brings us to this really important idea that the guide talks about a lot, which is the niche-first approach. Now,
Mm.
I know a lot of us have seen those people who get super excited about a product and then try to build a whole business around it.
Oh yeah, I've been tempted to do that myself many times. What's wrong with starting with something you're passionate about? Shouldn't that be like a driving force?
Passion is great, but you got to remember, you're not building a business for yourself. You're building it for your customers. And the guide really warns against that product-first mindset because it can lead to some costly mistakes.
So instead of starting with product, we should start with like a specific group of people, a niche that have a shared need or a shared interest.
Exactly. That's the niche-first approach. And the guide suggests starting with your own hobbies and passions. What communities are you a part of? What problems do they have? That's where your dropshipping journey should begin.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's about finding the market before you find the product. Can you give me an example of how that would play out in the real world?
Sure. Let's say you're into fitness, right? Huge market.
Yeah.
Lots of little niches inside of it. But instead of just selling like generic workout gear, you could target people specifically interested in yoga.
Ah, so instead of just selling yoga mats, maybe I create like a beginner's yoga kit with a mat, some blocks, a strap, even a little guide to basic poses. Something that solves a very specific problem for a specific audience.
You got it. You found a need, and then you've tailored your product to meet that need. It's not about chasing trends. It's about understanding people and solving their problems.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. So we've debunked some myths, talked about mindset, and got a grasp on the importance of this niche-first approach. But how do we actually find those winning products within our chosen niche?
Well, that's where the guide gets really interesting. And that's what we're going to be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've got our niche narrowed down, but now the big question is, how do we find those winning products that people are actually going to buy? The guide digs into some pretty interesting research strategies.
It's a combo of using your gut and then backing it up with data. The guide says start with what excites you, what products in your niche are you genuinely interested in, what problems do they solve, and then you put those ideas to the test.
The first tool they mention is Amazon, but not in the way I expected. They're talking about using this thing called Camel to look at price history. Can you break that down for me?
Yeah, so camel, let's see how a product's price on Amazon has changed over time. It's all about getting insights into demand. So if the price is steadily going up or at least staying consistent, that's a good sign. It means there's probably strong demand and healthy competition.
But if the price is like tanking, that's a red flag, right? Like maybe the market's getting flooded or people just aren't interested anymore.
Exactly. It could be a sign that the market is saturated or the product is just losing its appeal.
Mm.
The guide also says watch out for seasonal products because those can really mess with your income.
Hmm.
It's better to find products that have consistent demand all year round.
That's a good point. Okay, so we've checked Amazon. Now the guide takes us to Facebook and TikTok. But not to run ads. It's about spying on our competitors, right?
You got it. Think of the Facebook and TikTok ads libraries as gold mines. We're not going to spend money on ads yet. We're going to look at what our competitors are doing. Look for ads that have been running for a while, weeks or even months.
So if they're still pouring money into those ads, it means those products must be converting. They must be making sales. Makes sense. But how do I, as a drop shipping newbie, know what's working in those ads?
Pay attention to the pictures they're using, the words in their ad copy, even the types of offers they're running. It's like a free masterclass in marketing. You're learning what works for your target audience without spending a dime.
That's a game changer. But then the guide takes it a step further. It says, go beyond the data and get feedback directly from potential customers, like dive into those online communities.
Oh yeah, forums, Facebook groups, subreddits, anywhere your target audience hangs out. The key here is to be genuine, be helpful, ask questions. If you're thinking about selling a specific type of yoga mat, ask people in a yoga community what they recommend.
So I'm getting valuable insights without even revealing that I'm thinking about selling that product.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Okay, and then the guide shifts to TikTok and talks about something called search intent.
Right? TikTok is all about understanding what people are searching for. And the guide breaks it down into three main types: informational, commercial, and transactional. So informational is when people just want to learn something. Commercial is when they're thinking about buying something but need more info. And transactional is when they're ready to buy right now.
Okay, so I'm seeing how understanding that search intent can really shape the content you create. The guide mentions a really cool example of a Temu Airsoft accessories review series. What was that all about?
So the author of the guide actually used their own experience to show how powerful this can be. They made a bunch of simple, unedited videos reviewing cheap airsoft accessories that they found on Temu, and these videos got thousands of views.
So the goal wasn't to sell those specific products. It was about testing the waters, seeing if there was interest. And the high view counts told them that, yeah, people are looking for affordable airsoft gear, which they could then source from somewhere else for their dropshipping business.
Exactly. It's market research in action. And, while this kind of manual research is super valuable, it can also be a huge time suck. That's where tools like Minia come in.
Minia sounds amazing. Can you tell me a little more about how it works and why it's so useful for dropshippers?
Sure. So Minia analyzes millions of products across tons of platforms: Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, even Instagram. It gives you all this data on trends, demand, competition, even estimates on profit margins. It's like having a whole team of data analysts working for you.
All right, so we found our niche. We've researched winning products using a mix of our gut data and direct customer feedback. We're ready to launch our store, but now we've got another big decision to make single product store versus multi-product store. What does the guide say about that?
It's a big one. And a lot of it comes down to simplicity versus long-term growth and credibility. Single product stores are super easy to set up, but they can feel a little limited and risky. Multi-product stores take a bit more work up front, but they give you a lot more flexibility and they just look more trustworthy.
The guide mentions that customers are getting savvier about dropshipping. They can spot those generic single product stores a mile away, and it just screams amateur.
Totally. A multi-product store instantly makes you look more legit, even if you're only starting with a handful of carefully chosen products. It gives the impression that you're a real business, not just someone trying to make a quick buck.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards multi-product now. It feels way more sustainable and less risky in the long run. But now we got to think about pricing. How do we make those products irresistible to customers without leaving money on the table?
Well, that's where the art and science of pricing comes in. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our dropshipping deep dive. We've got our niche, we found some killer products, and we've even decided to go with a multi-product store for that extra credibility. But now it's time to talk about pricing. And honestly, this is the part that always makes me a little nervous.
I get it. Pricing can feel kind of scary. But the guide does a good job of breaking it down. It's not just about crunching numbers. It's about understanding how customers think and finding that sweet spot where you're making good profit without scaring people away.
They start with this basic cost plus method, which seems pretty simple. You figure out your costs, you add a markup, and boom, you're done, right?
It's definitely a good starting point, especially for beginners. But the guide says don't get stuck in that mindset. As you get more experience and you start collecting data, you'll want to look at more strategic approaches, like competitive pricing or value-based pricing.
So competitive pricing is basically looking at what your competition is charging and then trying to match or beat their prices. It makes sense to stay competitive, but doesn't that risk a race to the bottom where everyone's just slashing prices and profits disappear?
That's a good point. And the guide talks about the importance of differentiating yourself. If you're selling basically the same products as everyone else, then yeah, matching or slightly undercutting their prices can be a good strategy. But if you can show what makes your brand or your products unique, then you can justify charging a bit more.
Which brings us to value-based pricing, which seems a lot more nuanced.
Yeah.
It's not about what the product costs to make, it's about what it's worth to the customer.
Exactly. Value-based pricing is all about understanding the benefits that your product offers and then communicating those benefits effectively. So let's say you're selling a yoga mat that's made from sustainable materials, right? Instead of just focusing on the material itself, you could talk about how it's eco-friendly, how durable it is, how it supports ethical manufacturing.
So it's about connecting with the customer's values and their aspirations, not just their wallets.
I like that. Okay, but then there's also this whole thing about psychological pricing, which sounds kind of sneaky. It's like tapping into the weird ways our brains make decisions. Well, it's not really sneaky. It's just smart marketing. The guide talks about tactics like charm pricing,
Yeah.
prestige pricing, and anchor pricing.
Oh yeah, charm pricing. I know that one. It's that whole 1999 thing that somehow makes it feel way cheaper than $20, even though it's basically the same price.
Right. It's funny how much of a difference just one penny can make. And then there's prestige pricing, which is all about using round numbers to create a sense of luxury or exclusivity. So a $200 watch might seem more desirable than a $199.99 watch.
And anchor pricing is when you put a really expensive product next to a cheaper one to make the cheaper one seem like a steal.
Exactly. It's all about framing and perception. These things might seem small, but they can have a huge impact on your sales.
All right, so pricing is clearly more of an art than a science. It's exciting, but it's also kind of daunting. But let's say we've got our pricing figured out. Now, how do we actually get those products in front of potential customers? The guide dives into marketing, which feels like a whole other beast.
Marketing can feel overwhelming, for sure. But just remember the basics. Customers need to see your product, they need to like your product, and they need to buy your product. Everything else is just tactics to make that happen.
The guide breaks it down into two main categories: paid advertising and organic marketing. Paid ads, like on Facebook or TikTok, seem really powerful, but also potentially expensive.
They can be super effective, but you got to have a clear strategy and a budget before you jump in. The guide says don't just boost random posts because that's usually a waste of money. Instead, focus on targeted ad campaigns that reach the right people at the right time.
And what about organic marketing? It seems a lot more approachable, but also way slower.
Organic marketing is all about building relationships and providing value. Things like social media, content creation, search engine optimization, or SEO. It takes time and effort, but it can pay off big time.
One thing that surprised me was that the guide actually talked about email marketing as a powerful tool. I thought email was dead.
Email is definitely not dead. It's still one of the best ways to connect with your customers and encourage them to buy from you. The key is to segment your audience, personalize your messages, and automate as much as you can.
All right, so we've attracted customers to our store. They're browsing, they're adding items to their carts, and they're finally hitting that Buy Now button. What happens next? The guide really stresses having a smooth and efficient fulfillment process.
And this is where automation is your best friend. Tools like Zendrop can handle pretty much your entire fulfillment process, from automatically sending orders to suppliers to giving customers tracking info. It takes so much stress out of managing orders.
That sounds amazing. But what about when things go wrong? You know, delays, damaged products, unhappy customers? How do we deal with that?
That's where amazing customer service comes in. The guide talks about being proactive with communication, having clear return policies, and just genuinely going above and beyond to make things right.
So it's not just about selling products, it's about building trust and creating a positive experience that makes people want to come back for more.
Exactly. And the final piece of the puzzle is analyzing your store's performance. Things like conversion rates, average order value, customer lifetime value. These are all numbers that tell you what's working, what's not working, and where you can improve.
So it's all about making data-driven decisions, learning and adapting as you go. You know, honestly, this whole deep dive has been a lot to take in, but it's also really empowering to see how much control we actually have over our success as dropshippers.
I agree. The dropshipping world can seem intimidating, but this guide gives you a really solid roadmap to navigate it. Remember, the global dropshipping market is projected to be worth over $931 billion by 2030. Imagine getting just a tiny piece of that pie for yourself. What would that change in your life?
That's a really inspiring thought. It's a good reminder that with the right knowledge, the right tools, and the right mindset, anyone can be successful in this exciting and constantly evolving industry.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into dropshipping in 2024. Big thanks to you guys for sending in such a great guide, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.